Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with extremely tan and actually had some fun the last 3 days. Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold from the desert, from a lot of offense the last 3 days. How you doing, Evan Petzold?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm in Arizona, so I can't complain. Phoenix is a great spot. I always enjoy coming down here. I've got an opportunity to come down a couple of times now for the Arizona Fall League. Also, obviously, I've been down here twice for Tigers D-backs series, and it's always a good time. And you're right about that, Mark. Coming off a lot of offense that I was not expecting. I don't think any Tigers fan out there was banking on the Tigers to score any runs. When you go back and you look at the fact that they had a 3-3 week, it was 1-2 against the Miami Marlins. Shout out to Reese Olson and Casey Mize for their incredible work on the mound Tuesday and Wednesday. But they weren't rewarded because the Tigers laid back-to-back goose eggs against the Marlins, and the Marlins are the worst team in baseball. And so the Tigers weren't able to score at all. It was super disappointing to see them lose 1-0 on Tuesday and then 2-0 on Tuesday. They go into the off day on Thursday, and then that Friday series opener against the D-backs, Mark, I don't know where it came from, but a 13-0 win on Friday and then an 8-3 win on Saturday. The Tigers ended up losing on Sunday, but it was a 2-1 record against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So 1-2 against the Marlins, 2-1 against the D-backs for a 3-3 week. Look, the offense snapped a 20-inning scoreless streak, and then they ended up scoring like 21 runs in 2 games. So I think you take that as a positive, but man, the first half of this week was frightening.
Well, all I can say to you is we're not going to get into the Miami Marlins series much in depth. I don't even want to discuss it. But I will say it was a lot of fun, especially Friday night. And if you understand what the term BABIP luck means, there was a lot of that this weekend. A lot of balls found holes on a very fast surface. A lot of balls carrying in outfield gaps. No complaints. It was a lot of fun for me. I'm sure it was not much fun for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And today they almost stole another game. Bullpen kind of let them down a little bit. But yeah, 3-3 week. Not sure how that happened. We're going to take it. If I'm not incorrect, the first 2 games of the Diamondbacks series were the first time since 1961 that the Tigers scored more than 8 runs and I think had 15 hits without using a home run in either game. So just to show you.
That sounds about right. There's been a lot of wild stats being thrown around recently. Shout out, I don't know if it's Tigers PR department. I don't know if it's Bally Sports Detroit, but getting a lot of fascinating stats popping up these days. And that's one of them right there. That's a good one. Yeah, it's impressive to see though, right? Like they needed to score runs. They have needed to do that. Obviously, you're playing against the reigning National League champs who, look, okay, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they made their run. It was really impressive, but right now they're sitting at 22-25. The Tigers are 23-23. So the reigning National League champs are not playing like the reigning National League champs, and the Tigers took advantage. They took advantage against some pretty good pitching, and I thought that was noteworthy without a doubt. So that's what the Tigers are at, sitting 23-23, an even 500 record. They're 6.5 games back in the American League Central. Mark, it kind of felt like after the games against the Miami Marlins, again, like love the pitching performance, love what Reese Olson did, love what Casey Mize did. I love the huge home run from Spencer Torkelson last Monday. That was huge, both for him and for the team. It's a really big moment. But like that was bad when you think about the back end of that series, and it kind of felt like, things are starting to slip away pretty quickly. And the Tigers have had their troubles in April and years past. They had a winning record in April this season, and it kind of felt like, oh no, like is May going to be what April had been for the past 3 seasons? And it seems like that might not be the case anymore, but there's a little bit of a cause for concern. But, Tigers did a good job of bouncing back against the D-backs, and now they're sitting at 23-23 with 28.4% of the season in the books.
All right, first of all, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Adam Dorowski from Baseball Reference, because if you want to know how we get all these great stats all the time, at StatHead, you can pretty much put parameters for anything that's occurred, and you can get it. And my boy Adam has always been very generous, allowing me access, and there's quite a few of us in the Tiger baseball sphere who do use StatHead, and you can figure out some crazy, crazy stuff. So here's a free promotion for Baseball Reference on Days of Roar. But yeah, it was a weird week. I was getting to a point in time where a lot of meanness was going to be spewed if things didn't turn around. I was getting pretty close to the edge. As a beat writer with 162 games, you know better than me. You have better control over your temper than me.
Yeah, I don't ride the wave like that, Mark.
Nah.
I don't go crazy on Twitter, but I did tweet. I will say I did tweet, and I did like this tweet. It kind of picked up a little bit of traction. Was, man, in that Friday game, I tweeted, like, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now, because I really couldn't. Like, I could not believe what I was seeing with the Tigers. I mean, it was everybody up and down the lineup for the most part was hitting. Javier Baez was doing things that Javier Baez hasn't done since 2018, which was awesome. Like, it was a really good bounce back series. But Mark, it takes them into a really big series coming up, a 3-game set against the Kansas City Royals. And we're going to find out a lot about the Tigers here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Kansas City at Kauffman Stadium, aren't we?
We're going to go right to the big two. Question number one, which is, how are we about to learn about the Tigers this week, especially in the next 3 days with a big test against the KC Royals, who we keep waiting for them to wilt, and they will wilt. The question will be, the Tigers have been a really, really good road team and a terrible home team. So I'll be interested to see what happens in KC the next 3 days. You got a Skubal-Reagans matchup on Wednesday, but we're going to find out a little bit about both these two teams going to KC, and you have a plane flight like in the middle of the night or something, or they're taking you there by stagecoach. I'm not sure, but you know, you're doing something to get there, right?
Yeah, just an early flight on Monday morning, that's all. But Mark, I think it's fascinating though. This is a really big week for the Tigers because yes, they get to go on the road and play against the Royals, where, you know, those two teams, we're going to find out a lot about, you know, what the Tigers are made of, what the Royals are made of, and, you know, can the Tigers keep up? Like, again, let's take a peek at where we're at in the AL Central standings with the Tigers sitting at 6.5 games back of first place. You got Cleveland Guardians, they're out front at 30-17. That is the Kansas City Royals at 29-19, and the Minnesota Twins at 24-22, and then obviously the Tigers at 23-23. So there's some ground to make up, you know, with the Tigers trying to catch up to where the Royals and the Guardians are at the top of the division. And I think if you're the Tigers, you have to take advantage of the 3 games coming up against Kansas City. And then you go home and you play the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays have been a mess all season long, but it's a 4-game series, and the Blue Jays have talent. Make no mistake about that. The Blue Jays do have talent. And so if the Tigers aren't going to show up in Comerica Park, and if they're not going to hit, you know, the Blue Jays might be able to take advantage, and maybe they could steal a couple of those games. So I think what happens against Kansas City is really important, especially for it being a divisional rival that's sitting at the top. Reese Olson, Michael Wacha on Monday, Casey Mize, Alec Marsh on Tuesday, Tarek Skubal, Cole Reagans on Wednesday. Both these teams, their rotation's really good. They're both sitting at a 5.2 Fangraphs wins above replacement when you combine all of their starting pitchers. It's a 3.11 ERA for the Royals starting rotation and a 3.40 ERA for the Tigers starting rotation. The underlying metrics are really good for both teams. The Tigers have slightly better strikeout and walk numbers, but the Tigers also give up more home runs out of their rotation than the Royals do. So again, like, Tigers, Royals, Twins also have sneaky good, you know, rotation production so far this season. And then you look at the offense, and the Royals have Bobby Witt Jr. hitting .296 with 5 home runs and an .867 OPS in 48 games. The Tigers obviously have Riley Green, who's hitting .249 with 9 home runs and an .821 OPS in 46 games. Riley Green is not Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt is a really special player, and he's could, you know, cause a lot of headaches for the Tigers in this series. One thing that's frustrating me right now about the Tigers is Riley Green, last 14 games, he's hitting just .189 with 1 home run, 3 walks, and 16 strikeouts. He's 10 for 53. That's just not good enough. He's going to have to pick it up for the Tigers to be more successful. And then you look at the bullpens, and I'll take the Tigers bullpen over the Royals bullpen. Both are overperforming, at least based on the season-long numbers. But I think the Tigers have a significantly better bullpen than the Royals, and I think that could honestly end up being a huge factor in this upcoming series. If both starting rotations are going to pitch well, it's really going to come down to the bullpen. And the Tigers bullpen obviously has been sliding a little bit as of late, but I really do think overall they're a better group than the Royals. It's an interesting series for a lot of reasons.
All right, let's quantify a couple of these numbers. You discussed starting pitching numbers between the Tigers and the Royals. That would rank them. You want to share this, or you want me to tell everybody where those numbers on KC and Detroit starting pitchers rank them in Fangraphs starting pitchers?
Yeah, I mean, it's right up there in the top, 5 in baseball, like both for ERA and for Fangraphs WAR, right up there at the top.
It'd be tied for second for both of them right now in Fangraphs WAR and starting pitchers. That's how well the Tigers starting pitchers are throwing.
And how well the Royals starters are throwing too,
which is a shock. So it should be very interesting on that level. As far as relievers go, the Tigers bullpen in May has been pretty mediocre, but I will say you and I have discussed quite a bit of this in DMs behind the scenes, but I thought Jason Foley threw the last time he threw was as good a stuff as he's had since about the 17th of April.
He was really good.
He was looking much more like Jason Foley.
Mark, that was probably the best slider he's had.
Yeah, it was quite good. I think Brisky is an upgrade on Miller, who's really been pretty horrible. A little worried about Andrew Chafin, who has just been an absolute imploding nightmare here in the month of May, which is very unusual for him as a Tiger. But yeah, that's concerning because Holton has not been very consistent. He's been occasionally good, but sort of inconsistent. And Joey Wentz has shockingly become a big part of the left-handed trio. Bullpen not been great since the 1st of May. But we're going to find out where we're at, and hopefully the Tigers at least can revert back to a level of scrappy hitting that they had the first 20 days of the season, as opposed to the absolute futility the next 4 weeks brought until this past weekend. So let's talk about the difference between the home and the road splits for the Tigers. Tigers have been extremely good on the road and kind of atrocious at Comerica. This is a good time for them to continue performing on the road as they go to KC here. And I think it tells you a lot about a team because most bad teams do not play well on the road. Most good teams do play well on the road. So it's about time we figure out which one is which. You're on the road with them all the time. Share with me your thoughts about that and what it's telling you.
Well, I want to point out one thing. It's that the Kansas City Royals play amazing at home, and the Tigers are about to go play Kansas City at the Royals' home. So that is a little something to be concerned about. But it's actually interesting. The Tigers, sure, they're better on the road for sure when it comes to the offensive numbers. I'm sure that's what we're discussing. I think the pitching has been pretty much solid all the way through. But when you look at the Tigers and you look at the OPS, the on-base plus slugging percentage at home, it's 665. That's at Comerica Park. And if you look at it on the road, it's 687. So the on-base plus slugging percentage goes up when the Tigers are on the road. And that kind of aligns with what it looks like from a standing standpoint. When you look at the Tigers are 10-13 at home and 13-10 on the road. So, they played now 23 games, both home and road, and it's 10-13 at home and 13-10 on the road. I think that's kind of fascinating. Maybe it's not as big of a deal as we really think it is, but at the same time, the OPS numbers do speak for themselves, right? There is an uptick in on-base, in slug, and just getting on and being productive on offense when the Tigers are on the road. I do think some of that probably is I don't know, I don't want to blame Comerica Park, but at the same time, you're playing at Comerica Park, that place looks big. The backdrop is there. It's wide open. It's a big ballpark. It feels big. And so I wonder if that gets into, the psyches of the hitters at all. I think it probably does, as it has to several players in the past, including Cole Keith even recently talking about how, there was a ball that he hit that would have been a home run in Erie and a home run in Toledo, but he feels like he just has to get his homers on the road. He came out and said that. And so I think, when you hear that from a guy like Cole Keith and that there have been players in the past that have complained about Comerica Park, you do wonder how much the psyche factor actually plays into it. That's one of the reasons why the Tigers moved the fence in and they also lowered the fence walls it was almost more for the psyche of the hitter as it was for the actual dimension changes. And so I do think that there is some of that. I think it's fascinating, though, Mark, that it's 10-13 at home and 13-10 on the road. That's not as big of a difference, I guess, as I would have expected, is kind of the point that I'm making from a standing standpoint. But yeah, the offense is better on the road.
I think it's always good to see a team play well on the road. shows a lot of mental toughness and leads me to believe the team has upside in it. So, all right, let's get to question 2 of the big 2. Jack Flaherty has been freaking incredible. So let's talk about it. I think my feelings about the Jack Flaherty signing until the last 4 starts were pretty clear. But you not only have watched them up close, but you had a chance to talk to him this week. So let's talk about Jack Flaherty.
Mark, it's pretty incredible. If I would have told you when the Tigers signed him to a 1-year, $14 million contract in free agency that after 9 starts, he would have a 3.79 ERA with 8 walks and 72 strikeouts in 54 2/3 innings. Mark, that 72 strikeouts, that leads the American League. All right. If I would have told you that, what would you have said? Like, would you have called me a crazy man for thinking that Jack Flaherty, who, let's not forget, had a 4.99 ERA last season, and before that, a 4.25 ERA in an injury-ridden season. If I would have told you that he would have had a 3.79 ERA in his first 9 starts with the Tigers and 72 strikeouts in 54 2/3 innings, would you believe me?
Not a chance. Okay. And, we always like to joke about better London Nieves, but not only did they do some tweaking, but as you watch the progression from game to game, he had a pretty terrible fastball for not in velocity, but in productivity in the first 3 or 4 starts. And that is really picked up. And the capacity to sequence and finish hitters off has just been, awe-inspiring, especially this month. I mean, he just finishes hitters off one after the next. And I don't think anybody's seen this type of Jack Flaherty since 2019. And just another feather in the cap of the Tigers pitching trio and turning around a career of a pitcher who, to be honest, it turned into a giant question mark after a really good major league start.
Mark, let's hat tip Scott Harris really quick, too. I mean, obviously, Jack Flaherty's got to keep it going, and the pitching department's got to keep working with him as he navigates a full season of hopefully having, this stuff reborn, right? I mean, he is a star reborn. If you look at what he did in 2019 and the fact that back in 2019, he got Cy Young votes, he got, MVP votes, and he was really good at the beginning of 2021 as well, and only was able to throw 78 innings that year, but he had a 3.22 ERA and it was pretty damn solid. But hat tip to Scott Harris for knowing to go after this guy and get him, and then also, putting him in the laps of Chris Fetter and Robin Lund and Juan Nieves to get to work. It's been really impressive when you look at what Jack Flaherty has done. He ranks in the 97th percentile in whiff rate, the 94th percentile in strikeout rate, and the 94th percentile in walk rate. So getting a ton of strikeouts, like a ton of strikeouts, limiting walks at an elite rate, and then missing bats like crazy. He is missing bats like never before. A little bit more velocity and more whiff from the fastball, but the slider really stands out to me. It's a 42.1% whiff rate from 26.5% whiff rate last season. So he's almost doubling the whiff rate on the slider year over year. He's able to repeat his mechanics for the first time in a long time. He made a slight adjustment with the slider grip, but it really comes down to the body movements. I talked to him about that after his most recent start here in Arizona, where he was just lights out, man. He was so good. And he talked about, being quad dominant in the way that he moved down the mound. And now he's using more of his posterior glutes and his hamstrings, which has changed the way that he's moved directionally. Feels like he's moving straight towards home plate to throw with some intent behind the ball. Whereas in the past, he felt a lot of things in his quad. He felt like he was relying on his quads to get him down the mound. Now it's more of his butt and his hamstrings, and that's pushing him forward down the mound. And he's being able to move straight to home plate, which has made a huge difference for him, he feels like. And he hasn't really talked a ton about the delivery and the mechanical changes that he's made to kind of find that optimal delivery. Like, he searched for it all last year and was never able to find it, and that's why he had a 4.99 ERA. And he felt like there were certain pitches that he had, and he was able to land that, crisp, sharp slider every once in a while, but it was never repeatable. And now he has these body movements that he feels like are repeatable. And he started to open up about it, talk about it a little bit more. I think he's going to continue to talk about it even more and more as he goes along in the season and has more success. So we'll find out, more tidbits as we go. But I thought that was really fascinating to hear from him that, he used to be a guy who quad dominant now. It's the glutes and the hamstrings that's really taking him towards home plate and giving him good body movement down the mound. He's a feel guy. He's not a big numbers guy. He's not big about like, hey, like he's not like, hey, give me the numbers of how many pitches I should throw and in which situation. He's more of like, he needs feels. He's a feel pitcher. That's how he's been. It's how he's always been. It's how he grew up, learning under guys like Adam Wainwright, and it's working right now. Like that's how you get to a 3.79 ERA with 8 walks and 72 strikeouts and 54 2/3 innings. So Mark, here's my question for you, right? Like all things considered, obviously what they're doing with him with the body movements is working, and like the results are there. So what do you do if you're the Tigers? Like, do you trade him at the deadline? Do you try to sign him to a contract extension? Like right now he's on a 1-year, $14 million deal. I have my own opinions on this, but I'm curious what you think because, again, this is really good Jack Flaherty reborn. We haven't seen this in a long time.
First of all, I think it's, for me, way too early to have this discussion based upon the fact that, how competitive the team is. Is he able to do this for another month? I was joking with you that the last person that I really was against the signing and, had a few disses for the player was one Zach McKinstry in 2023. He came out in the month of May, much like Jack Flaherty is this May, and it's just killing people. I mean, if you remember Zach McKinstry's May last year, one of the best months, for sure the best month of his career, and one of the best months any player had in 2023. Now, what happened after that was frustrating and a borderline nightmare because he reverted back to not being a very good player. So,
Mark. Zach McKinstry has been bad. I just want to make sure that's well known. Like he's hitting 206 with 0 homers, 3 RBIs, and it's been frustrating since that May. So I get your point.
Right. My point is that before I start worrying about trade or spending money to retain him, I need to see another at least month, if not 6 or 8 weeks of performance, and then I think all will become clear. So,
can I ask you a question though? Would it be a bad thing if the Tigers just traded him no matter what? Like, let's say that he was really, really good. Give me a second, because if you go back and you look at last year's trade deadline, the Cardinals traded Flaherty, and at that time, he had a 4.43 ERA. They traded him to the Baltimore Orioles for 3 prospects. They got an infielder, they got a right-hander, and they got a left-hander, basically. All right, let's just leave it at that. The names don't really matter. The point is that they got 3 prospects, 3 young players, and sure, none of them were superstar, elite-level prospects, but they still got 3 young players back for Jack Flaherty with a 4.43 ERA. I really do think that in baseball circles, Jack Flaherty is very well loved because of how he came up and the fact that he was so dominant, so young. Even coming up as a really young player, even before when he was, obviously he's a first round draft pick. People loved his delivery, for him coming out of high school. And so there's a lot of love around Jack Flaherty in baseball circles. And I just think it's interesting that the Cardinals were able to get 3 young players. Say what you want about those young players, but they're able to get 3 of them for Jack Flaherty and his 4.43 ERA. It just makes me think could you imagine what the Tigers could get for Flaherty if he just even keeps his ERA below 4? I would have to think that they would be able to get a pretty decent haul for him. I understand that, there's some of that money attached. I get that. But at the same time, for a 2-month rental, can you get 2 pretty decent prospects as long as he has an ERA under 4? And if you feel like you can, then I think you trade him no matter what. Does that sound crazy or no?
Well, it only sounds crazy in the following ways. And I want you to put your hands over your ear, one hand over your ears and another one over your eyes, because I'm going to bring some reality to you. It's going to totally ruin your little day or night dream here. I always laugh when people start discussing what free agents the Pistons should sign or trades they should make now, and they're terrible. You know why I laugh? Because they do not have a general manager in this case that has ever shown any capacity to make a good deal. So what I will say, and I know certain people don't like it when I have this to say about the Tigers Pobo, but I'm not going to speculate on trades that Scott Harris can make until he makes a good one. Okay. I don't count Mark Canha as a trade because basically Milwaukee was going to fire sale him. They took a lower level minor leaguer and just want to get rid of the salary. So I ask you, what actual negotiated trade has Scott Harris made that, to your memory, has been impactful? So the idea that we're going to trade him isn't something I really think about too much because I'm not sure we have a Bobo that knows how to make a good trade yet until he does.
Oh, Mark, we've been kicking this conversation down the line, haven't we? We've been like kicking the can, pushing this conversation back. And I mean, you do make a good point, right? Like, I think that that's fair when you do talk about the fact that one, like, wasn't able to trade Eduardo Rodriguez. Like, that should have definitely happened. How you Lee, we don't know what he's going to be for quite some time. That was the Michael Lorenzen trade at the deadline last year after fumbling the Erod situation. And then obviously, like, you go back to even the Justin Henry Malloy trade, right? Like trading Joe Jimenez to the Atlanta Braves for Justin Henry Malloy. Like, where is Justin Henry Malloy right now? A guy that when that trade went down, Scott Harris said that Justin Henry Malloy could help them, like reshape their offensive identity. And I don't understand how Jahan is doing that when he's in AAA Toledo. Like, the guy has, I mean, I think now he has surpassed 800 plate appearances in his AAA career. Like, I don't understand what he's doing in AAA Toledo still. Like literally, Mark, no, like the guy, he's batting 276 with like a 420 on base percentage, and he's got some pop, and he's still sitting in AAA Toledo with like 800 plate appearances. Like, that's not reshaping the Tigers' offensive identity. That's reshaping the Mud Hens' offensive identity. And
Correct.
And then you go and you look at the Gregory Soto trade, and it was Gregory Soto and Cody Clemens to the Philadelphia Phillies for Matt Vierling, Nick Maton, and Donnie Sands. Nick Maton's not in the organization anymore. Donnie Sands playing in the Mexican League, and Matt Vierling is Matt Vierling. Like, he's your last guy on the roster pretty much. So I understand, like, Gregory Soto was frustrating because he walked a lot of guys, but he was tabbed as a 2-time All-Star going to the Phillies, and the Tigers were hoping to optimize. They were hoping to optimize all three of those players, and there has been no optimization of any of those players yet. Like, Matt Vierling is still the same player for the most part, aside from the fact that maybe he's playing a little bit more third base than he was when he was with the Phillies. Nick Maton, they never made him better, and Donnie Sands never even came up to the Tigers and played for him. So when you look at the body of work and you look at those three trades, How Lee, Justin Henry Malloy, Matt Vierling, like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I get your point. I'm not super excited about Scott Harris making a trade because so far the returns haven't seemed to have been great. I think Justin Henry Malloy can be a good hitter in the big leagues, but 800 plate appearances in AAA. Like, tick-tock. Let's go.
All right. So my answer to this question is I love what Jack Flaherty's doing. Just keep doing it. We'll revisit what to do with them. I will tell you something. We're going to take a break in a second, but when we come back on the other side of the break, Art Gorash has a trade idea for you, and we'll be back in 60. All right, we're back. Okay, I had a trade idea that I was giving some thought to this evening when we were doing show prep. I have not run this by you, so I'm very curious to your response. One of my favorite relievers, Edwin Diaz with the Mets, who's owed a boatload of money, is kind of struggling since he's recovered from tendon surgery on his knee last year. He was absolutely unhittable the year before, one of the best relievers in baseball. And they also happen to have a DH that we've discussed maybe 300 times. His name is JD Martinez. The Mets are actually not playing terribly. I'm not sure they're a viable playoff contender, but not terrible. They also, I think, are surpassing the luxury tax, and Steve Cohen doesn't really care too much about that. But at the same time, you got two guys that are almost $30 million between the two of them. And with the tax, it makes it even more expensive. But I was curious what you would think if I said to you, might be an interesting trade to discuss both those players who really, one is kind of on the bad side of Mets fans and kind of frustrating for them, who's an $18 million a year closer.
I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're asking the question.
All right. So I would say if I said to you, we could deal Matt Manning and Alex Lang for Edwin Diaz and JD Martinez, saves the Mets a ton of money, It also gives them 2 younger players under team control, a bullpen person that has previously been a closer, and a starting pitcher, which the Mets are always willing to give some consideration to. It adds some payroll to the Tigers, but it sure changes the dynamic of the team. And when you talk about the Jack Flaherty effect, it's going back to discussing what Federer and Lund and Nieves can do with guys that are slightly struggling. So I ask you, is that the Tigers need another leverage reliever. Let's not kid ourselves. And they would really benefit from JD Martinez's bat. So how about that idea?
Mark, I really appreciate how much work you put into this. I really do. But let me ask you a question, man. What gives you any reason to believe that the Tigers would pick up all that money?
I don't think Scott Harris would sleep for a week just at the idea of making that trade. Now, look, you're almost 2 months into the season, so you only owe JD Martinez $9 million or less. Edwin Diaz is more than an absorbable salary. So
Edwin Diaz has back-to-back player options in his contract, and then obviously there is that team option in 2028. But at the same time, like just to be real about this, like the Tigers didn't sign JD Martinez in the offseason, and there's no way they go back and they go re-sign it. Like if anything, if they needed a JD Martinez, it would be because Mark Canha got hurt, and if that's the case, then Justin Henry Malloy is coming up. Like that's how that's going to go. Like there's a reason why they didn't go out and get JD Martinez in the offseason. There's no reason why there's no reason Scott Harris would just turn around and make a deal for him. And then on top of that, obviously Edwin Diaz is great. Like the underlying numbers haven't been good. I mean, the strikeouts have been good, don't get me wrong, but like the fielding independent pitching has not been good this year. And then you look at the fact that he has the back-to-back $18.5 million player options. He's coming back from a major surgery. Like that's a bad contract that you're walking yourself into. Like if Edwin Diaz never gets it back, you're on the hook paying him $18.5 million back-to-back years for a freaking reliever. Like come on now. Like let's for a guy who at his healthiest, at his peak, will throw you 60 innings a year, $18.5 million. And he might not even be good. Like that, Mark, again, I really appreciate the thought. I really do. Because I think I see what you're saying. Like I get it. Like the Tigers do need offense. They need help. JD Martinez would be a beneficial bat, but he doesn't fit the construction of the roster in the Tigers' minds, right? And in the opinion of the Tigers, he does not fit the construction of their roster. Like that is how Scott Harris views it. And so I don't think that Scott Harris viewed it one way, back in February, March. I don't think he views it any differently, as we get into late May, because again, the Tigers are sitting at 500 right now. Like I think that things would have to be a whole lot worse. And even if they were worse, then they would just be punting on the season. So no, I don't see any way in which this happens, especially because I don't see the Tigers taking on that much money. And I don't see how you think that that's even realistic, that they would take on that much money. I understand JD, like you mentioned, is just $9 million. But I mean, dude, Edwin Diaz, like you could end up paying him 18.5 in 2026 and in 2027. Oh, and don't forget about the 21.5 that he's owed in 2025. So that's 21.5, 18.5, 18.5. That's not happening.
Evan Petzold, can I ask you a question? I mean, I can be kind of rough sometimes, but how in one discussion can we say how great Gutter, Lund, and Nieves are, how they optimized the guy who was struggling, who had a supposedly high caliber stuff and couldn't get people out or locate or optimize himself. And then in the next discussion, we're worried about taking on Edwin Diaz, who, when right, is among the best closers in baseball.
Mark, it's a $14 million starter in Jack Flaherty for 1 year, as opposed to a $21.5 million reliever, and then 18.5. And then another 18.5.
Yep.
It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, it makes absolutely
no sense.
Yeah,
that makes zero sense. Zero sense. Tigers Twitter, comment, let us know what you think. We're both on Twitter. You know where to find us. Let's tell Mark he's crazy, because, dude, that is crazy.
All right. Well, all I'm asking you is, if Edwin Diaz was good Edwin Diaz, would the money even be part of a discussion or not?
Dude, $18.5 million in 2026 and 2027. $21.5 million in 2025. You can find relievers on trees. You can go to indie ball and find guys, and you can shape them. If it's really about how good Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves are, why don't they just pick a guy out of somebody else's organization, add him to the 40-man, and then optimize them? Because if they're good, they should be able to do that for a cheap rate of MLB minimum.
Ev, let me ask you a question. Haven't they done that?
It's just a dumb investment. Yes, they have, and they can continue to do it.
Did they not acquire Alex Lang in a trade? Did they not acquire Tyler Holton? Did they not acquire Andrew Chafin?
Well, I'm going to keep Alex Lang.
Did they not sign Shelby Miller? I mean, how many of the bullpen so far did they not acquire Joey Wentz in a trade? I'm not really sure what we're discussing here, but my point is, all those guys came and they've tried to optimize all of them, and some have been good, some have been bad, but it's all about the ceiling, and it's all about how good of players do you want. It's not like they have a giant payroll, and I'm not really one of these you should have signed a bunch of free agent kind of guys, but there are times to spend money. There are times when you're getting a bargain. There are times when you are able to acquire high ceiling players, and all it costs you is you're risking some cash. Okay. And in a case like this, I'm not even sure the Mets would do the deal, but I got to tell you, if you're as good at optimizing players as we're discussing, now all of a sudden you got one of the best DH bats in baseball, and you got potentially, if you fix them, one of the best closers in baseball. And now Jason Foley's pitching the 8th inning. So, I mean, look, the bottom line is, I've said this millions of times.
That's a bad investment. That's a bad investment with the player options. That makes no sense. Next topic. I'm done with this.
All I'm saying to you is, you want to be good, you've got to take risks. If you're afraid to fail, you will never be good. And you know how you acquire really high ceiling, all-star caliber players? They play bad and teams want to dump them. Okay. And then your job is to optimize them and fix them. Happens every year. So, all right, let's get to the next topic. And I want to talk a little bit about the single biggest bright spot that the Detroit Tigers have had in quite some time. His name is Tarik Skubal. He returned at Phoenix for the first time. He pitched Friday in the 13-0 win. It was kind of like a walk in the park. He threw 6 scoreless, took a perfect game into the 5th. I'm not sure he was sweating. I mean, you know, what did you see? You were there, and what did he have to say after the game?
He was actually pretty nervous because, again, going back to Phoenix, like that's where he grew up in Arizona. Grew up in Kingman, which is a little bit of a drive away, but he had a ton of family there. He trains in the off season in Phoenix still. I'm at a place called Apex, and so his buddies from there, they all showed up too. And yeah, he was really good. Only one base runner reached safely. He was a little bit nervous going into the start, like I said. Like he was pretty nervous for it, pretty amped up. Got a lot of ground ball outs early, and then just racked up the strikeouts and was really, really good. Yeah, I mean, Tarik Skubal is solid. I mean, this is a guy who ranks first among MLB pitchers with a 2.1 FWAR and a 1.93 FIP. That's FWAR, Fangraphs wins above replacement, and then also fielding independent pitching. He also ranks second in the American League with a 1.80 ERA in 9 starts. So he's been absolutely dominant. He is on pace to win the American League Cy Young as it stands right now. Absolutely filthy, even going back to when he came back from flexor tendon surgery back last July. He's been unstoppable. Tarik Skubal is an ace. Tarik Skubal is a great pitcher. Tarik Skubal has a long way to go when we want to talk about like being an all-time great pitcher and stuff like that. But this is how you start that conversation, is you build good season after good season. And when you look back to what he did going back to July, it's pretty much been a full season of baseball from July until now getting into late May, early July into late May. Yeah, like he's been a really good pitcher for a full calendar year now. And we'll see if he can keep it going. I'm really looking forward to Wednesday's matchup where he faces off against a fellow left-hander, Cole Reagans of the Royals. But Skubal is the real deal. There's no doubt about it.
Right now it has to be the odds-on favor for the Cy Young. And, let's be really honest, between Casey Mize and Tarik Skubal, Tigers seem to be winning almost every one of their starts. And, as opposed to Reese Olson, who has arguably been one of the 5 best pitchers in the American League, and they're not winning too many of his starts. So it's kind of weird how luck reverses a season. I'm going to make a guess that the Tigers are going to start winning a few Reese Olson starts if he continues to dominate the way he's been dominating lately. I mean, it's, but the Scooble stuff, pretty unbelievable. All right, let's touch a little bit about the legend of Wenceel Perez. He continues to just rake. I think I tweeted some stuff out about his first 100 plate appearances in Major League Baseball, and anybody that had this kind of performance as something that Wenceel was going to do in 2024, I need to talk to you about getting lottery numbers.
Yeah, he's been incredible, hitting .301 with 4 doubles, 4 triples, 3 home runs, 12 walks in 24 strikeouts in 29 games. On top of that, he's looked a lot more comfortable in the outfield. He's making a lot of the routine plays. I think that's a really good sign. He doesn't have to make the spectacular plays, but he needs to make the routine plays, and he's been doing that. He's a guy the Tigers signed internationally out of the Dominican Republic in July 2016. If he hits and he's able to keep doing what he's doing, that's a big win for the Tigers international department. That's a big win for Tom Moore, for Miguel Garcia, for those guys in that department, because they've taken a lot of heat over the years for not being able to produce any international talent aside from Gregory Soto. And so if Wenceel Perez can be a dude, that's a real thing. And so far, he's like the only rookie in baseball who actually knows how to hit, which is unbelievable. Like when you talk about Jackson Holliday, Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, Jackson Chourio, Detroit's own Colt Keith, right? Like Colt Keith is a guy who's really struggled. Wenceel Perez, who was never labeled as a top prospect, he is thriving. He has a 904 OPS, which ranks second among 21 rookies with at least 100 plate appearances, behind only Joey Ortiz of the Milwaukee Brewers. His .301 batting average ranks first. His .377 on-base percentage and his .527 slugging percentage ranks second. So Wenceel Perez is doing what he needs to do. He's been one of the best rookies in baseball, and he's just got to keep it going. He's done a good job of being very selective, trying to stick to the strike zone, swinging at pitches that are in the zone, and it's been so far so good for him. Like he's got an above-average whiff rate, so he makes good contact, and when he's able to stay in the zone, he does damage. He does it from both sides of the plate. We've seen him succeed both as a right-handed hitter and as a left-handed hitter. That's almost a bigger deal, right? Like the Tigers have moved Wenceel Perez into the number 3 spot. So if opposing teams choose to target Riley Green, who's a left-handed hitter, in the leadoff spot with a left-handed reliever, then Perez can simply just switch and swing from the right side of the plate. Now, if opposing teams want to wait and target Kerry Carpenter, another left-handed hitter, in the cleanup spot with a fellow, lefty reliever, then Perez can just swing from the left side of the plate. So it provides a significant challenge to opposing teams when there's a right-handed starter on the mound, because if you're going to face Riley Green, well, you know what? You want to bring in the lefty for Riley Green? Well, then Wenceel Perez can just swing from the right side. Okay, you want to let, the righty, let's say the righty goes through Riley, and they're trying to target, Kerry Carpenter to bring in the lefty out of the bullpen. Kerry Carpenter maybe being in the cleanup spot, right? Then Wenceel Perez can just swing from the left side of the plate. He's better from the left side of the plate, but it's an interesting way to kind of like put opposing managers in a lose-lose situation when you have a switch hitter who's, batting pretty well from both sides. It's a huge benefit for the Tigers in the number 3 spot against right-handed starters. It's been awesome to see Wenceel Perez do what he's doing, and he's doing it with a smile on his face all the way. He is living in every moment, very, very present. It's fun to see.
It's an interesting explanation, because I was actually just thinking today that eventually long-term might be interesting to see Wenceel hitting leadoff once Riley gains some more consistency and moving him down in the lineup. But I suspect that you had a little talk with one AJ Hinch about why he's hitting third. And, the logic is kind of insanely clever, because he's a switch hitter. Although I did notice today he hit 6th.
But they were facing a left-handed starter on Sunday. That's why.
It's one of the first times they've hit him down in the lineup to be a right-hand hitter when the game, against Montgomery today. But I think that does tell you that they'll acknowledge that he's probably a better left-hand hitter than a right-hand hitter. But yeah, it was pretty clever that he did that. I also did a little dive on Wenceel Perez numbers the last 2+ years between Erie and Toledo. And I got to tell you that his numbers are surprisingly close in the major leagues to what they were in the minor leagues in Double and Triple A, which is kind of rare. Actually, temporarily exceeding them. I expect a little bit of regression, but where would the Tigers' offense be without Wenceel Perez? That's the question. So I got a question for you, though. I have noticed that one Parker Meadows, it's only been a week that he's been doing this, but he was raking a little bit this week down at Toledo. His average is up to 324. His OPS is over 900, even though it's probably only 40 at bats now. So what happens if Meadows finds a stroke, and what exactly would transpire then?
Well, I think if you hit, they'll find a spot for you, unless maybe you're Justin Henry Malloy. But Parker Meadows can play defense, right? And we know that he's an elite center fielder. So if Parker Meadows is able to, get it going and prove that he's able to lock some things in AAA Toledo, which again, like all signs pointing in the right direction, but also we know that the jump from, AAA to the big leagues is really difficult. So I'm sure there's some deep underlying metrics that the Tigers are very, very focused on when it comes to Parker Meadows in Toledo. And if he's able to prove himself in that way over a longer period of time, he makes an impact and Wetzel Perez moves to a corner spot, and the Tigers will somehow, some way, find a way to make it work. I bet you that. I bet you that. And that might mean that Zach McKinstry gets bumped off the roster at that point. But I still think we're a ways away from that. I'm sure the Tigers are looking at some, pretty deep underlying metrics with what Parker is doing in Toledo. And if the time is right, and if the timing is back against fastballs, like really back, then I suspect he'll get another shot. Parker Meadows is still a really good player, somebody that I think can be a big leaguer for a really long time. And I think the Tigers feel the same way.
Something to keep an eye on. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about home run hitter Spencer Torkelson. Okay, we got a bunch of things we want to cover. We're going to try to do them kind of in rapid fire ways. Got a few shout outs. So Spencer Torkelson goes home to Arizona, finally on time for a 91.7 mile an hour Jordan Montgomery fastball, and hit a solo homer off a left-hander. He also hit a clutch 3-run homer on Monday. Talk to me a little bit. What happened? What are you seeing? What are you noticing?
Yeah, so the Monday home run obviously was super clutch. That was a big situation. That was a really good sign just for like the clutch factor. Spencer Torkelson, time and time again, has struggled to come up big with runners in scoring position, and to be able to do that and contribute for the team. Like, he let the emotions out on Monday, flipped his bat. Like, he had a moment. He deserved that moment, man. Like, he's been grinding all season long. But I was still uncertain if he was actually going to be able to like keep it going, because if you look at the fact that Torkelson has 3 home runs so far this season, and the first 2 were on hanging breaking balls. They were slow pitches that were hung right over the middle, like pitches that he should be destroying. And he did in those cases, right? Both on Sunday and on Monday. And that was good to see. But my big question for him is like, hey, can you get on time for the fastball? Because if you go look at his actual batting average on fastballs and his expected batting average on fastballs, it's just not good. Like, coming into the series against Arizona, he was hitting 181 with a 178 expected batting average against fastballs this season. He hit 17 of his 31 home runs off fastballs last season. But this season, he hit the first 2 home runs that he had were off breaking balls. And so from my standpoint, it was like, until this guy gets on fastballs, he is not going to fully heat up. And I understand that Torkelson has been good from the sense of, it's been 12 of his past 13 games that he's gotten on base, but he still only has a 280 batting average during that stretch. Only 2 of the 12 games were multi-hit games, and none of the 12 games are 3-hit games. So until he got on time for fastballs, I didn't think he was really going to break out. And then he takes Jordan Montgomery deep on a fastball. And I understand that it was a 91.5 mile an hour fastball, but he hit a 428-foot home run to straightaway center field, 106.5 off the bat. Point is, he was on time. That was really encouraging. He needs to keep doing it. He needs to keep staying on time for fastballs. If he can do that, he's going to break out. But until he is consistently on time for fastballs, I'm not fully bought in yet. This is a step in the right direction, though. Really good sign for Torkelson.
Did you notice something about his setup you thought was a little different?
Yeah, I haven't got to ask him about it yet, but I noticed that going back, I was watching some video, going back to even like late April, the hands in his setup were up more by his ear. And now the hands in his setup are more kind of in front of his body, more near his jawline, almost like he's ready to attack the pitch. I don't know if it was because having the hands up by the ear caused for, that longer bat path to get into the zone and wasn't able to get to the ball on time, wasn't able to get out front on the fastball. And now because he's brought his hands down a little bit more, it puts him in more of a position to just go and straight attack the ball. I think that might be the case. I got to go talk to him about it, though. I haven't gotten a chance to chat with him. So maybe that could be something we discuss next week.
All right. He has 2 hits all year on fastballs of 95 plus. So until that's improving, color me skeptical. All right. Let's talk about quickly. Casey Mize trending in the right direction, not making any progress. He's been grinding pretty darn good. And I thought last outing he looked a lot more polished with his secondary pitches. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I had a good chat with Casey Mize before his most recent start. And we talked a lot about the fact that he's competing, he's grinding, he's getting through starts and there have been, zeros on the board when he walks off after an inning. And those are good signs. Even going back before his last start, it was a 3.58 ERA. That's really good, but also he knew that there was room for improvement. He relied heavily on the fastball. The slider and the splitter, weren't really there for him. The split's been okay, but the slider has been a really inconsistent pitch for him. And then he went out in his last start against the Marlins, who the Marlins were going to try to jump him on the fastball. There was no doubt about it. So he had to mix things up. He couldn't just be fastball heavy against the Marlins because of how much they like to swing. So he had to mix it up. He had to go to something different. And I thought he did a really good job of mixing in the secondary pitches. Lowered that ERA to 3.50 in 8 starts. He retired the final 11 batters as well as 18 of the final 19 batters following a 2-run home run in the first inning. So he did his part there. I thought he was solid, and I liked the way that he went about his business, right? This is a guy who coming into that start threw 45.1% four-seam fastballs, and against the Marlins, it was 23.3% four-seamers. So more than a 20% drop in his four-seam usage, relying heavily on the secondaries. The plan worked. He kept him guessing, especially early in counts. The splitter I thought was fantastic. If he has that slider and he has that splitter working, I think the sky is still the limit for Casey Mize. Can he get there? Can he do it enough? That's a big question.
Really like what I've seen from Casey Mize. Learned how to grind. I think the breaking pitches, the more he throws, the better the breaking pitches will be. The fastball's already been a big improvement. Real happy with where he is and what he's done and how the team's played behind him. All right. We got to talk real quickly about a few other things. We got to give a few shout outs, but Javi Baez, have a weekend, baby. Was it just lucky, or is he doing a few more things that might be sustainable?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Javi Baez is one of those guys that, he gets you pretty excited for a couple of days and then suddenly he disappears. But what a 3 days it was for Javi Baez. 3 for 4 on Friday. In Friday's game, he had 5 RBIs. That was the first time he's done that since 2018. He hadn't had 5 RBIs since 2018, right? And for him to be able to deliver like that was huge. And he follows up a 3 for 4 game with a 4 for 5 game. So 3 hits, then 4 hits, and then he was able to get a hit for an RBI single there in Sunday's series finale. So a hit in every game, driving in runs, only 3 strikeouts in the series. It was a really good version of Javi Baez. Hopefully he can keep it going. Hat tip to him. Also, by the way, he's raked at Chase Field here in Phoenix. So I don't know if the Diamondbacks maybe want to trade for him, but he's been really, really good at Chase Field. Hopefully he can keep that going into Kauffman Stadium and then going back to Comerica Park.
Guess who's tied for second on RBIs for the Detroit Tigers this year so far, I think it's one Javier Baez. So
that's crazy.
I just wanted to
5-1 game helps, but
I wanted to say that out loud because it's true. All right, Kenta Maeda started a game in Toledo today through 3 innings. I'm sure that they plan on him starting at least one more, and we'll see how that one goes. And he could start about 11 more, probably, if that one doesn't go well. But I would suspect that he'll throw 4 to 5 innings and up to 70 pitches in the next outing. But would you hear anything, or when do you think he might return?
Yeah, well, he threw 3+, so he did a 4th up down for him to be able to get up a 4th time coming off the bench. So yeah, I think it was a good sign for him to be able to get up and go. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It was 53 pitches. He did a pretty good job in terms of getting the strikeouts. And, the usage was really interesting. He threw 19 sliders, 13 splitters, 10 four-seam fastballs, 4 sweepers, 4 sinkers, 3 curveballs. The 19 sliders stands out to me. Fastball velo is all still the same, but I thought it was interesting because, again, he typically throws he typically throws more fastballs than splitters and sliders. So I think the increased usage of the slider tells me that he's focusing on that. as part of his rehab process. He needs a sharper slider to survive, especially if he's not going to be able to throw his fastball above 90 miles an hour. I don't know if he needs another one. Like, he's eligible to come back on Thursday, and he threw 53 pitches. And so, if they feel good about maybe running him out in a piggyback situation or even beyond that, like if he threw 53 pitches. So if he's able to get up to throw 65, 70, maybe that's all they really want him to go anyway, and they can just transition him back to Detroit. So I think it all depends on how the delivery is, what the mechanics look like. Obviously, they've been working on some things. It was a viral illness, so he was sick, and he's working back from that. Like, he's also, getting paid $24 million over the next 2 years, and he needs to pitch. He needs to pitch well, so we'll see.
Short version, Kenta Maeda was terrible before he got demoted, or at least went on rehab. I think it's going to take more than 3 1/3 innings in Toledo to convince them he's ready to come back. I would almost guarantee he has another start. However, in the carpe diem life of Matt Manning, what did you think of the start today? Give me a fast 2 seconds on that.
Yeah, Matt Manning wasn't very good. He was putting base runners on all game long. He didn't have his good stuff, wasn't getting ahead in counts. It was the worst version of Matt Manning that I have seen in 2024. That counts spring training, some AAA starts that I've seen, and then obviously, the starts that he's made here with the Tigers. He was quite poor. He did not make a case to stick around. He definitely made you kind of wonder, man, if Kenta Maeda is able to miss some bats, is he really that bad? Because Matt Manning didn't miss any bats, and that was frustrating.
Yeah. 4 swings and misses, a 21 CSW percentage. Doesn't get more AAA-ish than that. I was curious, did he say anything to you after the game about what he thought about his outing or what his thoughts were, or no?
He wasn't pleased at all. I mean, I guess he was proud of the fact that he was able to limit the damage. Like, he basically, every single inning was one really big hit away from just being absolutely toast. So he did a good job of battling out of situations, stranded, runners on the corners a couple of times, left a lot of guys on bases. Like, I guess that was a positive, piece to look at. But yeah, Matt Manning's been not so good. He was not good, and he knows he was not good. He really struggled against the top 3 hitters in the Diamondbacks lineup, 3 left-handed hitters. Go look at the splits. He's been terrible against lefties this year, both in the big leagues and in the minor leagues. That's something to watch for. He really needs to get that splitter working for him if he wants to, neutralize those hitters, because you can't be a starter in the big league level and struggle against lefties. Right now, lefties are just absolutely crushing him.
All right, we're going to try to wrap it up. We do want to give a word about Gio Urshela's been back this week doing kind of Gio Urshela type of things. The defense, you can see what a massive upgrade that is. And he's just damn annoying at the plate most of the time. Had a couple of really scary, terrible at-bats in big situations, but done a lot of good things and just always kind of is an annoying at-bat with runners on base. Got to like that, right?
Yeah, Gio Urshela does a good job of putting the ball in play. He moves the ball forward. He's had a couple of really bad at-bats and then also, a lot of solid at-bats that we've seen. I do like the doubles from him, hitting the ball to the gap. That's a really good sign. The more that he can get into the power, the better, because the contact skills are there. Another thing, you hinted at it earlier, but just really quick, Bo Brisky, obviously joining the Tigers, taking the place of Shelby Miller, who landed on the injured list. Tigers placed Miller on the injured list, retroactive to last Sunday, with a right ulnar nerve irritation, and he's not eligible to return until May 27th. He went to Arizona with the Tigers in Phoenix. He will not be with the Tigers in Kansas City, but while he was in Phoenix, he received a hydrodissection procedure, which is like a minimally invasive non-surgical procedure that uses ultrasound tech to basically address the inflammation in his right ulnar nerve. And it's going to be a build-up process, and the Tigers are going to keep monitoring him, and we'll see. Hopefully we see him again at some point sooner than later, but you hear ulnar nerve, and that doesn't really sound great, but I'm not a doctor, so we'll see. Yeah,
well, Bo Brisky, pitch well. You'll never see Shelby Miller until somebody else gets hurt. All right, it's time for us to get out of here. I'm excited for this KC series. I want to learn, are the Tigers contenders or pretenders? So I'd like to remind everybody to please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. And you can always find us in every Evan Petzold article at freep.com. I also noticed that you saw a 68-year-old man in some video clips at freep.com this week. That was me, I have to admit. I'd like to thank our executive producer, Kirk Crawford, and Free Press editor, Nicole Avery Nichols. our producer, the man who saves us every week. And I'm keep telling you this, we got to have a few minutes of Rob and Chan on the podcast. We need to do that soon. Love to my grandson, Braden Michael Gorash, the spectacular Savannah Petzold. Shout out to you. Evan will be home eventually, I think Thursday or Wednesday night. So until next week, I want to say to everybody, peace.